going to be in that jungle with the slight nerf that that Hecarim has had. I still think that he is king of the jungle. As Renekton going to be banned away. Now DRX, they're forced into a difficult choice, right? Do they ban nothing away and leave up Thresh and the Hecarim? And the answer is they're going to ban the Thresh. And so T1 can go towards that horse if they want to, but it does mean that Pyosik gets to pick up his Udyr if he wants it, and we've seen Udyr's win in this matchup, even if it's not the majority of the time.
And again, it is Pyosik, and that's why we keep going back to what form will DRX be on today. Now, Kaz has played a very serviceable there.
Interesting.
I don't mind this, and I feel like even though, in my opinion, the Hecarim is a stronger pick at the moment still, in a vacuum, taking away the Udyr from Pyosik does make sense. And as you pointed out, one of Hecarim's weaknesses that we haven't seen exposed as much is his early game. If you invade him early, if you can get a lead there and try to deny him farm with priority lanes, which T1 indubitably will be having with how strong they've been playing, then it becomes a lot harder for Pyosik to kind of hit the break points that you need on the horse.
Well, Pyosik is going to do it. And we'll see what they are going to line it up with. If you're going down the tier list and things like that, there's not as many things that are glaringly open at this point in time with the red side bans. We actually don't see this a whole lot. Like the must-ban champions, there was a time where red side had to literally ban the same 3 champions every single time. It feels like the power level of these picks is certainly high, but it hasn't really been happening as, there's the Zoe pick away against Faker, but also a big one for Solka.
And that's really interesting because, yes, Faker had a breakout performance, as he does with his every season. I mean, he's been in here for so long, and he's the best League of Legends player of all time, so he'll have a couple of performances like that. But what's interesting is that a blind Zoe seems like something that T1 can definitely punish. This is a different approach, though, which T1 has been favoring, saying that
is it just Gnar Orianna?
We know, exactly. We know Gnar has been nerfed. We know it's a pick that is under a lot of scrutiny, but Kana has shown that he has the level of control on Gnar that some like Kingen also had. And important to note, Kingen's Gnar in of itself is also a threat that T1 might not want to deal with, because yes, you can deal with the Gnar, but it does require a lot of jungle attention. And I don't think T1 wants to focus, or let Kaz rather focus on top side. This would be very comfortable here for T1, but it does mean that in the early game I expect Solka to actually have a little bit of pressure on Faker.
Faker has been playing the Victor very effectively though recently. This was what they just obliterated Humble Life Esports on, and it was with one of these very strange drafts. It was still back on 11.5, but Jace is going to be picked up here, obviously. And this
throwback.
This is actually fantastic though, because this not only destroys Gnar in lane, but sets DRX up for a pretty decent poke composition.
And the poke composition was back early in the split, where I went from DRX as just a team that wins games that they shouldn't. They're actually a good team. This was their execution, the way they played around Division, the way that they were able to consistently leverage the most value, was really cool to see from a team where the expectations generally were very low. No one expected this DRX to do this well. Everyone expected them to be, maybe bottom 4, maybe vie for a potential playoff spot, and even though they have dropped off, I think it's important to note that this is DRX going back to when they looked most comfortable, when they did look strong, when it wasn't just them just grabbing away victories, but actually finding the co-composition, finding the early leads, and then playing it out beautifully.
Well, the Kalista is going to be banned away after the Varus that was aimed a little bit at Teddy there. Interesting. Feels like more of a deft ban these days, but maybe a little bit of a hint as to what Teddy has been playing in scrims.
Is there the Kai'Sa is still open, and the interesting thing about Kai'Sa, of course, is that you can look at things like the Aphelios, the Jinx that have been very popular, but with Thresh being banned away, it's not as strong as it always was. I think the Kai'Sa pickup for DRX would be very in theme with what they've been doing so far.
I love this so much more. Okay. Oh my goodness, DRX! This is spicy. This is a big level up in their drafting, actually. I think that in their series versus Sandbox, it felt pretty lackluster. And yes, the series didn't mean very much at all, right? They were already confirmed in playoffs. They were already confirmed that 5th place. And the Ezreal, I think, just fits the theme of this composition very, very well. Kai'Sa Leona come out as predictably as ever. And this is some stock standard drafting out of T1 right now, but is looking a little outdated.
I agree. I think that both comps are actually fairly cohesive. The T1 comp obviously has a bit more onus on them to actually do something, because if you get into a mid to late game scenario, DRX has a slight lead or they're relatively even, then the poke coming out from DRX combined with the Brom, which I also love because that counter engage is so useful with the poke that you already have from DRX is really nice. The one issue is that DRX have had issues with actually staying even in lane. I'm not even talking about ahead. I think that this composition, even if you're relatively even, can still do so much work due to the amount of this is disgusting in terms of poke, right? You have 3 insane poke champions. Even just an Ezreal and 2 items later on will get you there.
Not to mention the fact that Braum is probably one of the greatest supports to augment a poke composition at the same time. Like, you fish for your Winter's Bite, you land that passive, and then you can pull the trigger. But non-committal CC is exactly what you need.
And it's also hard to engage into the Brom, and this is a key thing for DRX. The only downside of this is that the Hecarim feels a little bit out of place because he wants to go in, the rest of his team not necessarily, but he will have prio lanes, presumably here with the Jace and the Zoe in mid, at least initially. That means he can farm up to the point where he's strong, and then Pioche just needs to play a little bit more respectful. The one downside and the one big caveat, and it is a big one, Atlas, is that if T1 get ahead, and they choke out vision, they find flanks and engages. Once they get on top of you, game is over.
I actually love it because a poke composition based on the archetype has always been basically a coin flip.
Yeah.
Because if you don't manage to get all of that control, if you don't get to that point where you can utilize it, poke comps look real silly really fast. But what is DRX as a team, if not a coin flipper? So I think it's absolutely perfect as we hop onto the riff for T1 versus DRX. Game number 1 of this best of 5. T1 with a very standard draft, looking like they haven't needed to make any sort of changes whatsoever. And let's see whether it's actually going to work out here in game number 1, because we were having a chat backstage and we predicted that this was going to be the plan for T1. That is, just pick all of our standard champions, don't give anything away, just play comfort. And then if you're pressured, if you're forced to make any adjustments, that's when you do it. And we already know, we saw it in the Harmwell Life Esports series, they have so much left in the back of the tank, and it's things like the Volley Bear. It is definitely, the current OP picks and things like that.
I agree. It's a very conservative draft from T1. The good thing is, if you get a smash win here as T1 with this conservative draft, what we see often in these best of threes is that then as the game, or like as the series progresses, it gets more and more stumpy. Damwon Key is a really good example of this, where they might have difficulty with you in the first game, but then the second game, not as much, and the third game is a complete blowout. And that is a pattern that historically T1 has also followed. And if you don't have to give anything away, if you can keep your crazy carrier counter picks hidden, you're going to be super happy.
Yeah.
Like, as you say, nothing is given away from this. It's a super standard team composition. You're playing for prio lanes. You have some scaling aspects with the Kai'Sa and the Victor. And as a whole, you can play a lot of different ways. Whereas DRX, one way to play this comp, and you need to do it well.
Well, let's see whether they can. As into the laning phase already, you expect that Kingen is going to have the shove, and indeed he does. Both of our junglers just farming things out. Both of them starting on the bottom side of the map. I think this is intelligent for both sides, because getting that matchup to a good point is important, as Bao's going to get engaged on there just a little bit. Good stun comes out, and you can see the counter-engage potential from this Braum. You know, he just taps the Leona as she comes in, and then you can actually trade relatively well.
Yeah, playing Braum into engage reports is a very good feeling. You're very happy about that.
This was also when T1 won the level 2 race as well. Just shows just how strong Braum is level 1.
It's just the sheer force of not only the damage, but the CC allowing Bao to weave in a couple of extra autos. They still need to be respectful though, because earlier in the split I would have felt comfortable saying that Teddy was the teamfight AD carry and Gumayusi was the laning AD carry for T1, where Gumayusi would always find 20, 30 CS leads, and then compared to Teddy, his impact later would be less. However, this current version of T1 is they just win basically all the time, which is a bit of a problem.
Yes. It's a problem for their opposition.
Yeah.
It's not really a problem for them. I'm sure they're pretty happy with it. As Cuz's stats are pretty good outside of him getting into his enemy's jungle.
And I...
continuing that one. As you
I looked into that, and when you looked at the picks that he played in round 2, it was mostly either champions that want to power farm, so he just power farmed his own jungle, or gankers, right? Things like the Volley Bear, where you're not really... You're more expected to set up the rest of your lanes than to actually go in. I think a champion like Nidalee that he also played could have gone in deeper, but as a whole, Cuz has been just super diligent about doing what his teams need him to do. Whether that is set up vision, play around his lanes, find objectives, and consistently get the smites, which is also something that we've seen some mess ups every now and then here in the LCK.
Yeah, smites are difficult, you know. It's not even just in the LCK. I just find that smites they've become more and more difficult to get working. From what I've seen.
Honestly, if I'm a jungler and I'm playing in a meta where Jinx has no cap on her R and Cho'Gath is on the fringes, like all those things just make you very unhappy.
Yeah, no, it isn't helpful. It certainly isn't helpful.
Not great.
I do want to go into sort of the success of this particular. Oh, okay. This is a good matchup for the Ezreal, as it turns out. But I want to talk about this iteration of T1 because you were talking about, you know, Gumyushi and the differences between Teddy and him. I think it's actually a little bit larger than that, and I think it comes down to what veteran status brings a team, and especially as of what we've seen for T1, and that is discipline, right? And I think that Cuz has come in, and your point about, you know, him being diligent, him just, you know, playing to the win conditions of his team, just shows that he is so much more disciplined now than he used to be. Cuz used to be an extraordinarily flippy jungler. Like, I don't know whether it's just a thing with DRX junglers, but, you know, Cuz dating all the way back to when he was on Longzhu, he's always been that kind of guy. He's dominant in solo queue, but has a bit of that mentality. We haven't seen that this season.
And we have seen it with Owner, and I think that's why I'm happy to see Cuz back, because even though Owner had some really highlight plays, as a whole you can still see the inexperience and the lack of discipline jumping in when you shouldn't. And as you said, Cuz has been super well about that if they go in.
Oh, Teddy avoids the Winter's Bite. Could actually be a big deal here as the stun comes down onto Carrier, but he's happy to soak it. Good sidestep on the E as well, but you can see Bao still playing aggressively. Cuz coming in for a bit of a love tap there onto Pyosik. We'll just get booped and not too much more will happen. Slight advantage for DRX in the lanes, I think largely owing to the solo lanes laning very well so far. Doesn't mean too much for where this game is at, and despite getting a little bit of antsiness in these lanes, not really too much to write home about as it all stands.
It's a classic first game in the best of 5. Both teams are kind of feeling what is the form, what are we looking at, how are our opponents looking. And as expected, there are sizable leads coming out. As yet again, Carrier and Teddy, they just keep trading in this 2v2.
Yep, Carrier just loves pressing that E button. And it's a decent time to do it as well. You already saw Cuz getting that deep vision in, I believe. I'm not sure whether Hecarim's standing on it right now, but he was certainly spending some time in his opponent's jungle. That is going to buy a bit of a reset here for Teddy and Carrier on the bottom side.
And that creates a possible tempo lead where Teddy and Carrier will be back in the lane, might find a shove. Cuz can clear his bot side jungle, and then they could look towards a first Drake, because as T1, interestingly enough, I think that when it comes to a straight up 5v5, you actually do have an edge if you're first at the objective. If DRX can set up shop and clear out some vision and just start throwing poker at you, it's never going to be fun. But their level 6 power spikes are still really strong. Leona, if she can go in, follow up by Teddy, Cuz slapping someone down, or a big ultimate by Kana, all those things will allow you to basically deal with DRX before they become a problem, before they hit that first spike, and they really start chunking those health bars.
Looking forward to seeing how it's going to work, as Kingan's going to go for his reset as well. 30 seconds until Shelly does spawn on this map. I think Herald's actually going to be very important for either side as well, especially looking at this top lane. I imagine that Pyosik is going to have his eye on that area of the map, because if Kingan gets a ridiculous lead in this matchup, things can get very, very rough. And T1, as you said, back in the lane now. We'll see what this actually means. We'll see where the focus is going to be, whether it will be, as T1 does like to do, a little bit more aimed around the Herald, trying to get that first turret and trying to get a tempo advantage that way, or whether, as you say, the Dragon is going to be what's on the menu.
And you can sense the tension in this 2v2 as Carrier is about to hit level 6. Teddy has already hit it, because if you get Teddy ahead in this matchup, historically, as we saw, discipline in the LCK, the Ezreal has been the big winner in the matchup. But if you go way back, Kai'Sa was actually considered one of the stronger picks into the Ezreal, because in a vacuum, like in a 1v1, you always just win, right? Like you hit your Void Seeker, you go in, you blow him up, and there's not that much you can do about it.
Yeah. Ooh, Faker taking a lot of damage here as Solka lights him on fire. Canna now grouped up with Cuz. Cuz always seems to be in the right position to defend when Piotrik's spending time up here. This goes back to what we were saying. Cuz like mitigating the pressure this time around. As now possibly waiting for Solka. Stun going to come in. Piotrek going to answer though. Devastating charge pushes him back, but yeah, Cuz is he's Udyr, so not going to be threatened too much.
Throwing out the Smiter, making sure you have the chilling smite for the possibly upcoming fight. Cryo is gained by Bauernbecker. They're already set up, but they need to be respectful. Again, DRX are the ones that need to play it slow, that need to avoid and engage.
Yeah, this is aggressive. Carrier has the Eclipse, though. He's soaking so much damage as Petty gets exhausted in the end. Cuz going to get that smite off for the extra heal. Does have flash, so he's not going to die. However, does still have to get out of the pit. As you can see, Canna still on the top side. No teleport. And that is going to mean that this Cloud Drake does go over to DRX.
And initially, you might look at it and say, DRX, they go in so aggressively, but it is with the knowledge that they have the teleport advantage available, meaning that even in the worst case scenario, you're fighting 5v4, and that is all you'll take any time of the day. The initial Drake here goes over to DRX, and thank you for that, Atlas. There will be no Cloud Soul this game.
Yeah, I know. Look, I needed to get better. I got it all out of my system during the regular season.
Exactly.
And look, I was watching all of yesterday's games. Not a lot of Cloud Souls were there, but I was still in the chat, and often that meant that the curse just
that was
continued.
enough. Yeah. It's a powerful curse indeed, and that means that for DRX, getting early Drake leads is really, really nice, because an Infernal Drake with a poke comp like this is devastating. However, the question of whether or not that play was actually worth it remains to be seen, because T1 got a couple of plays, Kana is a little bit less behind in this matchup now, and the Rift Herald will go to T1.
Yeah.
And you pointed out why it's so important. You want to get down those towers as DRX, you want to get a gold lead on your carries. Not able to do that. If T1 are actually able to scale up evenly, the margin that you have becomes so much thinner in the mid game.
This also goes back to what we were talking about poke compositions and how they function as well. Like, the more control of the map that you have, the more darkness there is, the more difficult it is for DRX to actually play to the win conditions of a poke composition. It's why poke comps have historically been so hit or miss. You know, whether or not, you know, it's now or whether it was 2 years ago, you know, these things do not change. And sometimes you get those leads, those advantages, and sometimes you don't. But the thing with T1, especially this iteration of T1, they generally get those advantages and they hold on to them. So it's going to be very difficult for DRX to fight this uphill battle. That being said, it's not uphill yet, and these lanes that we knew were going to be strong are continuing to be. So I think Solka even overperforming in this matchup right now, as Canna looking to dive on forward. Loses out on that trade as it turns out. The burst just a little bit too powerful, as that empowered shock blast does not connect, or the accelerated one, depending on whether you want to get it right or not.
I forgive you.
Thank you.
It's fine. We all make mistakes. Some of us more than others. Me.
Yes,
but,
I mean,
you know.
there's no need to insinuate.
I know, I was talking about myself.
Oh,
I
right.
wouldn't dare talk about you that way. That would be... It's my first playoffs and I'm already trash-talking my co-worker. That would be terrible.
Now I know that I've worked with Papa for way too long, because that would have definitely been aimed at me if it had been that situation. Papa, if you're watching, I love you and miss you. As T1 just going to get to work clearing out this bottom side of the map. True Shot Barrage going to come through just for some poke here for DRX. And Bauernbecker still putting on some pressure, but no plates have actually been gathered. And it does feel a little bit like T1 are just chilling. Faker going to avoid the bubble and is able to put on a lot of damage here. Had flash, didn't quite have the kill threat, but this is scary because Faker starting to look more and more online, and now he's gifted Shelly into this mid lane. I think this is so cool because they had an opportunity to shove it towards topside, but instead, oh no, Faker's not actually going to get any gold. So never mind, that's just going to be all over to Cuz, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, that's very sad, because
yeah,
I was like, yeah, I agree. Accelerating Faker, you know, he's been playing super well. He came back. He's truly back on form. No, it didn't get any gold. It just went to Udyr, who is not who you want the gold on. Because even though it looks hilarious in the late game, it's not great. He doesn't utilize the items nearly as well as a Faker would, and
maybe it's time for a Lich Bane. Maybe it's carry time for the Udyr.
Oh boy. I'm here for it.
Well, speaking of carrying on Udius, let's see whether Cuz can make something happen up here. Mostly positioned for a counter gank, but still not going to find any joy, and I believe there was vision on the Hecarim anyway, so he just packs it up, and he's going to take the camps that are available on his top side.
This is both a classic LCK early game, where the one for all the ages, which we've seen countless times. But more importantly, it's also a game where T1 don't fight outright insane leads, and I don't think it's something that you should expect with this composition, because if you look, DRX, they have prior lanes, Ezreal and Braum. If there was a problem, it's that they're too safe, they don't actually have a lot of threats. But this is a really good sign for DRX, because previously in the last couple of series, they fell behind at this point already, and then it was a really tall order to actually get back.
Ooh, good opportunity for a trade there from Kingen, as the Hyperproc not going to nearly make up for it.
And if they can actually go and keep contesting these objectives, if they can keep denying T1 and they can find some early item spikes, we might have a series on our hands. And don't forget, yesterday we thought it was going to be a quick one for Hanwha Life as well, okay? And we all know how that turned out.
Indeed. Well, Cuz is going to try and make it a little bit more difficult here for DRX, as Kingen's going to get bullied out of the way. This is all of that extra money, Chronicler, that Cuz is putting to good use. As this tower just going to get brute force down. The plates, unfortunately, had fallen down already. However, this is going to be a good use of their time, as T1 do manage to crash the first turret of the game. So, let's see whether that 85% win rate is going to claim true.
And I think they might give up a play here, or a player in the bot side. And they will give up the Drake, which I think this is
teleport timing though, but no, not going to go for it. Just enough burst damage.
Yeah, I was about to say, I feel like it might be a bit much to try and contest that. You don't want to overreach her as T1 because you're still in a comfortable position. This composition doesn't need to get early leads. You just need to play the mid game well.
Well, there's the flash out, but still the Terrify is going to land onto Faker. Teleport comes on in as Solka in a bit of trouble, has to flash out, but they still manage to pick up the kill, and Solka holds on to his huge lead that he has in that mid lane.
And if you're someone you want a gold lead on, it is Solka or Kingen. And you'll take that any day of the week. You are able to not only get the kill, sure, Zoe gives up a flash, but as Faker has shown us, flash is optional on Zoe as long as there's a team fight around you.
Yes.
And you take Faker's flash, and a Victor without flash, especially at this stage of the game where his damage, as you can see there, is not insane to the point where if you try and dive in and he like Chaos Storm and Gravity Wells on top of himself, you just immediately die. He's actually pretty vulnerable here, and this feeling of safety that he gets isn't necessarily 100% warranted, because yes, he has good topside vision and the teleport is available, but being that far up against the Hecarim at this point in time, we've always seen how that ends. And DRX finding a crucial first blood. And this is looking a little bit more like the DRX that we saw in the beginning of the split, because they don't need leads, they just need to be in the actual game, and seemingly today they are.
The thing is, like, this is a DRX that hasn't been winning lanes at all in round 2, right? Not until this game have we really seen them be able to actually command these positions on the map. So very impressive stuff so far, especially when it then results in DRX being able to play towards what is a very strong poke composition, because DRX have also had some issues where if they do try and get themselves these comps that do have lane priority, it feels messy when the teams need to be cohesive in the later stage of the game. They have won some of those games, but we won't talk about that because it's very difficult to actually tell you why. They just somehow do. But this is not flippy DRX. This is DRX understanding what they have to do and then just doing it very well.
And if they can keep playing this disciplined, I think that the next Dragon fight is really going to show what form this team is on today. Because if they get that soul point, for T1, a Mountain Soul is atrocious, because if you look at their lineup, it's very backline dive oriented. Faker.
Yeah, in goes Pyoshik, wasting no time at all, but now they're looking to try and turn this one around. Solka finds the Paddle Star out of nowhere. Cuz still looking for it. Remember, this tower is not there. He has flash available. Solka not so lucky, but Cuz doesn't want to press that flash button because it gives one potentially to the Zoe. Cuz now as well looking for Becca, who comes on in, but not going to be able to find too much.
I take it back.
There to save him.
Cuz uses the gold very well. Unfortunately though, Faker dies again, and this is the capitalization of the flash that was blown earlier. Second time that he's been taken down, and Faker, the victor in this matchup and in this game, just means that no matter what happens as T1, you can sleep well at night, knowing, okay, listen, we have the backup insurance, right? If all else fails, Faker on his trusty Victor will be able to carry the late game team fights. That is still the case, but the more gold you give over to Sorka, the harder that is going to be.
Oh, Yoshik's in trouble here. Meganar comes out and the horse smashed against the wall. Take the boulder to the face. And Kana says, my clock tower is the last thing you're going to see. Now he's going to start stealing away the jungle from the horse, and Pioshik, he does this sometimes just a little bit overly aggressive in his position. He knew that they were killing his inner turret.
Secret Agent Jace able to escape any vision that was thrown the way, and it's yet again, yes, Faker has a really good topside vision, but there's a reason why Hecarim is this popular, even with the Everfrost not being layered perfectly there. It doesn't matter, and look at the angle that Sorka finds as well. Cut's trying to body block, and Sorka's like, no, no, no. Not allowing you that. As, yeah, this is just, you know that there.
It's greedy, right?
It's very greedy. And this is a problem that Pioshik has had, especially in the second half of the split, where he uses Ghost there as well. And I think that's the real egregious part, because that means that the backline of T1 is going to be not nearly as scared in this upcoming team fight. This is a fight that you need as DRX, because I talked about it's very unfortunate for T1 if you lose a Mountain Soul, because a lot of your damage is initial upfront burst. Yes, later on you'll have Victor, but before that it's Kai'Sa goes in, blows someone up. Kana goes for a big flip into the wall. You need to blow up people in like that instant. If you can't do that through a Mountain Soul, you're in a bit of trouble. That's DRX. Your pole comp does not like shield, and a global shield for the opponent team,
especially one that resets every time you get out of combat.
Not it.
Is certainly not what you want. I think an Ocean Soul would have been worse
to
fight into. However, this is still pretty bad. As DRX do get position around this Drake, but now T1 want to fight for it.
Oh, Kana.
Oh, look at that Naba. That is beautiful right now as T1 wanting to try and avoid this poke. So far, so good. And Kana just skirting around the edges. You can see all of these abilities flying through, but none of them finding any joy here as DRX going to lose priority in the mid lane, and that means that they lose priority in the river. T1 will deny the soul point, and this looks a little bit like a turning of the tide.
It's a super respectful play there from DRX, which is understandable given that if you misstep there, you don't only give up the Drake, but you actually just could outright lose the game. Because if T1 gets fed, the margins, as already said, that you have with this poke composition for you to get engaged on are even thinner. The downside of that is, though, yes, that initial poke didn't hit, and I'm glad that they respected Kana, but I feel like they could have stuck around a little bit more, right? Because they did know where Kana was. It wasn't that there was going to be a Meganar out of nowhere, which was what T1 was initially looking for. And now you give over the first mountain. This mountain is okay, but the next one you need to 100% take. And T1 has slowly been building up the gold lead through seemingly nothing here, and it's just turrets.
Yeah, it's turrets as well as the Teddy effect. I don't know. Teddy hits around 15 minutes and then gets more farm than his opponent. It's one of like the special things on his card. Like if you pull the Teddy card out of your booster pack, it's like apply 20 CS when the timer hits 15 minutes. Because they were struggling in the lane. But of course, Teddy's ahead by 10.
So it's like a pre-evolution of Chovy, it's like the better version of that same perk.
Yeah, might actually.
Because he has plus 30.
Yeah. No,
that works.
He also finds minions that don't exist on the map.
Ah,
so
it's a different archetype.
Yeah. Even your teammates can also have like extra CS perks because I think Chovy just pulls them out of thin air. It's sort of how that one works. Certainly had a great day yesterday. Good old Chovy.
And with the current state of the game, DRX is still very much able to just hit the 2-item spikes, right? Like, look at this. King in. Not quite stacked on the Manamune, but does have that plus Eclipse. 2 items on Pioshik, 2 items on Sorka. Bao finished his core items. Yes, he's still going to be looking towards as Cyril does, but he's going to be doing absurd amounts of damage if he can actually land the poke. And
I actually wouldn't mind him to even prioritize the Duskblade earlier, because the extra lethality in a poke composition could be very strong. But we'll see what he does.
I agree. I think it's the combination of the armor penetration against a rather beefy frontline in Kana, Kuz, and Carrier combined with the potential to kite back and use the slow.
Yeah.
But you're right, if you go for like the big blowout team fights, then Duskblade is pretty insane. So,
not to mention ability haste being pretty good at getting more Qs.
It is.
And now DRX do find another bubble. This is what their comp can do, right? And Mountain Rift, even though it's not exactly the greatest soul for them, like they would have loved to get an Infernal, right? Mountain Rift is a Zoe soul.
Oh yeah.
Because you can bubble through so many more things on this one. So I mean, that works out for DRX, and they get that without actually having to kill the Drakes, which is pretty cool.
On the flip side, Kana is also like, yes, more walls.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
I don't know who benefits more from it, because you know, Ezreal can jump over walls. Kingen is also happy to have some defense. I guess it depends on who plays better, because if Kana finds a big smackdown into specifically dead wall right there, you see in the, like the left part of the screen.
Yeah.
Then otherwise wouldn't be there. Then we can call it.
Well, Faker doesn't like more walls.
He doesn't. No, he's had.
I'm not as happy about that.
And it says a lot about the form of T1 that yes, Faker is getting behind, but it doesn't really warp the game to a point where we'd be worried. There have been iterations of T1 where if Faker wasn't carrying, we'd be like, oh boy, this is not looking well. But you can see the rest of the team, particularly Kana, whose turret pressure and just overall presence on the map have been super good this game.
And also, Faker doesn't need all that many resources to do his job in a team fight as well, right? Like, Teddy's been funneled quite a lot, but, you know, Faker on the Victor is just wanting to get these spells out over and over again. He has his Zhonyas now, and so going to be pretty comfortable there. And it's going to be on, you know, Teddy to find some options as far as backline. And if T1 can find their picks that they're looking for and utilize the incredible amount of map control that they've bought for themselves with all of these turrets that they've been able to take, as you can see, it's 4-1 on the turrets. T1 have done their job as far as denying what a poke composition needs, which is control of the map, but they do still need to make something happen with it.
And T1, I'm super impressed with how well they've been able to weather the storm. They need to kind of wait out this power spike from DRX though, because I feel like if you give them a leg up now, you might get into trouble, but if you weather the next 5 minutes and stay even, don't give them soul, possibly don't even give them soul point, don't give them Baron, then DRX is scaling, or lack of scaling rather, is kind of going to kick in.
Oh my,
no way.
Are we really doing this? Is this really happening? Okay, no, it's given away. DRX in the area. This is ballsy from T1, yeah. Down to about half health on the Baron. T1 desperately wanting to get DRX over to this area. They are going to get their wish. As DRX wanting to try and layer some of his poke. This Baron down to about 3,000 in T1. Of course, they don't want to flip. As Pyosha going to take a bit of damage from the Baron. Now it's the blue buff being delivered over to Faker. Slow comes in. There's the Zenith Blade as Teddy comes on over. Can they lock him down? The flash forward Teddy, so aggressive! As the horse will fall. Keria taking a fair bit of damage as the Chaos Storm getting hyper value in the backline. I don't know how T1 have done this or why they decided to go for that Baron, but it worked out beautifully.
And we said T1, they have a composition where you need to pull the trigger. Well, they pulled the trigger there. Flash forward from Faker, flash forward from Teddy, flash forward from Keria. It's still risky to go for this Baron because there's so much poke available.
It's not a flip anymore though, because there's no smite available on DRX's side. However, this is a poke composition. It wants to be in these sort of spots where they can just throw buttons at their opponent. That is going to force T1 away. The horse back up in 3 seconds time. T1 just taking 1 kill out of that. And now, it looks like this Mountain Drake will be taken by DRX. So after all the dust settles, this actually is a win for DRX.
It's a win. You trade your jungler. Unfortunate, sure. As Pyosha yet again gets caught in position where he's not really allowed to be for... He just gets greedy, right? And this is miscommunication, because you can't do this if the rest of your team not there. If everyone else is there, you're fine. Instead, he has to use everything that he has defensively. Will still go down in the very end. Also, look at this flash forward from Faker that's about to come in here, because if he doesn't get exhausted, I think DRX gets chunked way more, and then T1 might feel a lot more comfortable going for that follow-up Baron. Instead, this matchup still on the knife's edge, but we've seen teams in a position for soul point before, and it just means that T1, now they can't really mess up anymore. A single mess up, a single catch, and you lose the soul.
Yeah. They can mess up maybe in the next 2 minutes.
That's okay.
You know, because then they can't throw the soul. However, after that, no messing up at all, T1. Make sure that you're paying attention. It's only 1,500 gold the lead here, and you did mention, you know, like, this is DRX, right? They've come back from worse.
Oh yeah,
they absolutely have. Sort of their their way. And with the fact that it's 4-2 in turrets, this lead is basically not real. As Kingen going to find a few friends. Pyosik also going to get rid of Teddy immediately after the Killer Instinct. A lot of CC, takes about 4 turret shots, and Teddy will be taken down. The Jace is going to be traded, but now Cuz running into the enemy base is precisely not what you want. So here's the mess up. It was within the minute, so they're not going to lose the Drake. However, still a bad sign.
Timing, not the worst, but the play there was an attempt from T1 to salvage the side lane pressure. You do have the availability of the Killer Instinct for Kai'Sa to try and set these plays. However, there's 2 prerequisites. One, you need to actually be able to kill Kingen, which they did, but it took way too long. Secondly, even though they had vision in the immediate part of the jungle, they didn't actually know where everyone on DRX was, so it was a really, really deep play. Didn't quite work out. T1, though, still going to contest this Baron.
Yep, 3 versus 4 right now, 6,000 health on the Baron. Canna wanting to get that Nabar charge. Remember, this is exactly what Faker wants. This is precisely the position a Victor is in love with, as Becca has to get out of there. Pyosik as well is almost dead. Kerry is going to be traded for as Canna gets to the Mega Gnar in the nick of time. But the Baron is still going to be warded off, and that was 100% because Faker existed. He almost has that Chaos Storm back available as well, as Kingen's going to turn up one more time. I believe he's completely invisible to T1. As now Teddy get into the area, and now we're just going back again as they force the reset. The Braum is still backing. The Pyosik's coming from base right now.
It's fast.
Bubbles still getting on in here. Yeah, remember, this is Kai'Sa. She does do a lot of damage to the Baron, but once again, T1 are not willing to flip, and they back away. But the gold lead is shrinking. That Drake still belonged to DRX, and the more T1 do this and don't get anything for it, the worse it's going to be.
And I like the idea of catching someone in the side lane, but again, the rest of T1 isn't actually ready to follow up on this play. And look at this fear, because it puts Teddy in a position where he takes 2 extra turret shots, otherwise that Kai'Sa might be way healthier.
Oh, yeah.
Just has to basically say, okay, I'm dead here anyway, I'm just going to try and run through the base store as long as I can. And then it is the combination of, as you say, the Victor who loves people clumping up in tight spaces, even without his Chaos Storm, and also Karnas, who's like playing so well to the limits of this Gnar. You know, the moment that Mega Gnar comes in, you need to be out of there.
Yeah. The death rate value that Faker was getting there, as you can see, was very, very high as we're going to jump back into this one. Kingen taking a bit of damage here from Canna, but trading it back relatively well as well. DRX is now on the Gnar, so the trading is going to be a little bit more difficult for this Jace in the side lanes, who is building towards his armor penetration, so that's going to help him out in the matchup. Faker's got a Lich Bane, man. This guy is looking to fight extended trades. Oh no, Kingen caught out in his jungle. That is precisely not what you want. As now T1 with 48 seconds on this mountain. We said that T1 can't make the mistakes if this Drake is going to be available. Well, DRX also can't, because that will put an extra dampener on that timer.
The one upside is that they do have pressure around the Baron area, and as long as Carrier doesn't find a big opening, it's kind of hard for T1. You see, they can, if they catch someone, they can blow them up quickly. This was a similar attempt to what we saw earlier, this time, however, effectively, because once you actually get on top of King and he doesn't have flash, he dies very quickly to Udyr, and not a lot that is in there in terms of counterplay for him. Drake will go over. I was thinking maybe DRX, if they want to play it greedy, they can try and look for a play on that Baron, or at least threaten it at the very least, force T1 into a comfortable macro position. But instead, it looks like this game, like the first game yesterday, is just going to go the distance, Atlas, because it doesn't looking like there's any resolvement as of yet. It'll, oh, we always need to be careful, but it's not a Jinx ultimate.
Yeah. I saw like it was True Shot Barrage, not a Super Mega Death Rocket, and I was like, it's okay. There's no need to get excited at this stage. You may have been thinking that the teleport was available, Kingen was going to spawn as the Drake was spawning, but one of the really important things to understand about a poke composition is you need setup, right? And so they were never going to get the setup, which is why they had to forfeit the Drake, no matter what, just in case anyone was curious. But this gold lead has not changed, Chronicle. It is flatlining this game. This is like very, very slow, cool, calm, connected. And yes, this was a mistake from Kingen, but didn't really cost DRX too much other than losing a timer towards that potential Mountain Drake for themselves. Goshik's ghosting. They're looking for Faker right now as the gravity field is going to work. The flash comes out, devastating charge. Only going to move Faker closer to safety, but flash away from the Victor, so important.
This time Faker does have the Zhonya's available, so while the flash being gone is still a dangerous position to be in, it's not as bad as it would otherwise be, as Cuz.
He's supposed to be tanky. Gonna have to flash out as well. Count him. That is 2 flashes now down, and DRX using this as a sign to potentially go for this Baron. Nara's on the bottom side of the map, teleport in hand. And it is going to come through here. Let's see whether DRX can actually find this. As they're looking to try and collapse on the one, I do like the idea. However, Kana is able to get out of the way with that extra movement speed.
And both teams are playing really, really respectfully, and it makes sense considering this is a best of 5, and it's just, it feels so good to get an initial play right, as they're still going to go for the Baron.
Yep, they thought the DRX had actually gone for a reset here as they see King in the mid lane. All right, is the team fight. Big Nara into the wall, but only really landing onto Becca, who goes golden as well, soaking so much of this damage. Chaos Storm is going to wear out as Teddy tries to be a hero 1v3 in the back line. Does he have the ability to keep himself alive? He flashes into the wall, will be taken down, and Bao will survive. And T1 are limping away from this battle. Faker now in trouble. Remember that flash from earlier? Yeah, you ain't getting out of that one. And Pioshik will take down the man in the mid lane, and T1 make a fumble that could cost them this Baron.
And they want to pull the trigger, understandably, but I feel like, as you said, they blew everything on Becca. It's just a Braum. He stalls with his shield, then he stalls with the stopwatch, and that means that DRX, after all, now going to be able to pick up the Baron here. And a poke composition with Baron at this point in the game is insane.
Yeah.
And normally I'd say this is like a last hurrah for DRX, but if I see how well they're playing, I don't actually know, Atlas, as everything gets used. Kana tries to go for the hop, is forced to use his flash there, and I think that he thought that Sorka was what Becca was, but Sorka was coming from the top side of the pit, so you don't actually get anything. Teddy goes in super huge. If you blow up Bao there, fine. You know, you can salvage this fight, but instead, basically everything gets thrown to kill a Braum. Pioshik still has his ultimate available throughout this entire team fight. Faker doesn't even get to click his stopwatch. And getting siege on with this composition is bad, but even worse, in 1 minute and 40 seconds, is that soul point, Atlas.
Exactly, and this Baron should be able to taxi into that one very, very comfortably. And this is something that you don't necessarily have to talk about when it comes to poke compositions, because once the poke composition is in a good spot, sieging becomes kind of irrelevant because you've already done your job and you should be winning the game. However, we now need to mention, because we're at that point in the game, poke comps are really good at sieging, like super ridiculously mega good at sieging. As you could understand, they have a lot of range, they have a lot of damage that they can throw down without having to commit to anything, and that makes things real tough. They can also put Pioshik in the side lane if they would like to, because his job in a poke comp is be a horse, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Be a offensive or defensive horse, depending on what the moment calls for.
Yeah.
Or defensively or offensively, both are really fine. As long as you stay alive, you're happy.
Well, he's just going to dive in underneath this turret, able to sprint his way out as well, as you can see, buying a lot of space to get damage down. They have this siege minion doing a fair bit of work as well. And this turret not going to last very long whatsoever. As the last few autos, this should be the inhibitor going down. You saw Kana was able to get that minion wave move towards that top side very comfortably. So DRX is going to have to do a little bit more housekeeping before they can break apart the base anymore. Now, this inhibitor, they're looking to try and take this before they get out. Void Seeker not going to find too much joy. T1 still trying to get this setup in position. T1 now feeling like it's their opportunity to move in. Does over to the side, Bubble will connect, base gate going to be there, but still going to get chunked. Solka does so much damage. And now Kana's going to dive forward, gets the Gnar back on two, good wallop, and Bao disappears from the fight. Now running away is the Udyr, not going to be so safe, but the bottom lane's dead. The Jace is dead, and Faker is at full health. Carrier able to get all of his CC down, and DRX will be lying on the floor. Carrier even presses his stopwatch. He will, no, I was about to say that he was going to go down. Eventually he does, but that is the ace for T1, and the teleports erupt on the top side of the map. Faker will return the favor, and the inhibitor wasn't even taken.
It's the OG T1 special. They look like you don't know what's happening, you don't know what's going on. They're
like an injured gazelle with a minigun hiding in their pocket.
One team fight is all they need, and it is Kana that finds the engage. And we didn't have the time because so much has been happening in the last couple of minutes of this game, but you saw when Bao went for that, and not actually gonna end. I got a little overexcited. How can you not? And I think if that was Kana, they might have actually been fine. But the key thing here is, how do you get on top of Bao? Because his damage is obscene at this point in time. They get a little greedy in trying to farm damage for Cuz, and it's Kana on the Gnar of all picks that finds the lockdown.
Range as well. Damn, that could have looked really silly, but instead, that's probably the game-winning play if T1 walk away with game 1.
I agree, 100%, because that right there is the answer to a question that is really hard for T1, which is how do you deal with Ezreal? Sure, Zoe and Jace are somewhat immobile, right? Those are picks, especially without Flash, that are pretty easy peasy to get to. But Bao is an Ezreal that has hit his item spikes, he's Cleanse and Flash available, and he's a Braum standing by his side. Actually getting on top of him in a team fight is a nightmare. And it's up to Carrier and Kana to actually make that work, because you see the moment that Ezreal goes down, there is plenty of damage on the side of T1, and Bao has also realized that, because looking at inventory, the taxes have been paid.
Indeed. QSS now put together. Bao should be able to finish off his build pretty soon, and it's going to be one that doesn't actually have a Mythic in it. As was very popular on Ezreal initially. We've seen a lot of Duskblades put together, but despite what I was talking about, he is just going to completely ignore it. Of course, Ravenous Hydra very, very strong on the Ezreal, especially in against a short-range composition like T1's. I feel like you would get a lot of extra value there. But as we saw, the Drake was taken by Kana as well. And so 3.5 minutes and it's soul point for both teams. There's now Kingen possibly in trouble here on the side lane as the bubble didn't actually connect there onto Cuz, who is, he's just running real fast. 5-0-4 on Kana's Gnar right now. And look, I've been one of the people that has said some nasty things about Gnar, but after that last play, I feel like all of us Gnar haters are looking real silly.
It's just how well Kana is playing, really.
Yeah, right.
And the amount of pressure that he had, barring the very early game where, as expected, Kingen was able to output pressure, was able to put a lot of threat on the top laner, with a little bit of help from Cuz, who was mainly there just to make sure that Pioshi doesn't run over him. Kana has been playing so incredibly well, and the teamfight threat and space that he provides for Faker and Teddy to do their thing is exceptional. Honestly, the only thing in the T1 comp where I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work out, and we saw it earlier, is that Kai'Sa for Teddy, because I believe in Teddy to have a good impact. But the nature of Kai'Sa in her current form means she's so binary, right? You need to kind of go in, otherwise you don't provide a lot of value, especially into a DRX form that has so much range available.
Yeah. Well, Super Minions are pushing down the top side. We've got a teleport in from Kana. This is very far away from this Baron that is being burst down extraordinarily quickly. Cuz wanted to get in there and make it a 50-50. Voidseeker goes wide. The Baron very low. Now Pioshik looking for the turn. Teddy avoids him completely. Devastating charge onto Faker. Teddy just going to play it defensively. I love it from this guy. His carrier will be taken down, but another flash Gnar from Kana, and he says no. We are winning game 1. Faker goes golden. That's the ace. Quadra kill for Teddy, and that is going to be game.
In the very end, T1 finds the flank, finds the fight that they were looking for. The kite back on that final fight was beautiful, because you saw DRX, they thought they had the opening. Kana was nowhere to be seen. He was charging up his Mega Bar on the Krugs, but still, they weren't fast enough. And that is the one downside of the DRX comp. Actually hard engaging without the setup isn't what you do very well.
Yeah.
You need time.
Just a beautifully well-played last 2 team fights from T1. And I can't overstate this, I was expecting this game to be way less close than this.
Agreed.
And I also thought that perhaps the drafts would be a little bit closer as well. I feel like DRX got almost exactly what they needed in order to win the DRX way, right?
Yep.
Because, you know, it's a flippy comp, but they're the kind of team that does love to play around these knife's edges, and they have been able to do it in the past, and it looked like it was working until, you know, Kana finds the flash Gnar.